From a 19th century marvel of engineering came a modern haven for wildlife, Glenasmole. How you doing, folks? Welcome again to Wildlife Wednesday. At the foot of the Dublin Mountains, just beyond the teeming metropolis that is modern-day Tallaght, lies the beautiful valley of Glenasmole. And in that valley, there's a wonderful man-made feat of engineering, which, when you take into account that it was built in the 19th century, was for its time a colossal achievement. Built to supply the ever-growing demand for a clean water supply for the citizens of Rathmines and Rathgar, which formed a rather affluent area of Victorian Dublin of the time. The project was first proposed as a way of controlling flooding and supplying water to the mills along the river by renowned engineer Robert Mallet. And here I quote from Christopher Moriarty's book, Down the Dodder. The first proposal for a reservoir in Glenasmole was made in a report to the Drainage Commissioners in 1844 by one of the most distinguished engineers of the time, Robert Mallet. He considered placing a dam in the gorge where the lower lake now lies, but dismissed the idea, saying, between these slopes of the valley, it would be possible to construct a reservoir covering from 60 to 90 acres, but the situation is far from desirable, and construction of any reservoir here which would lay the basis of the impending clay banks under water would certainly be attended with extensive landslips, injurious alike to the land above and to the capacity of the basin below. Nor could any sufficient area here be conveniently obtained that would control the waters delivered into it from the great catchment above it. Following on from this quote from Mallet himself, Christopher's text continues. After considering a great number of possible sites higher up the valley, he finally proposed building a dam about 500 metres upstream of the present embankment. This was to be 30 metres high and 312 metres across. The capacity of the reservoir would have been 6 million cubic metres, nearly 4 times that of the upper lake. The aims of the plan were twofold: to control flooding and to improve the supply of the water mills. Domestic water was not a consideration at the time. The Drainage Commissioners were unimpressed, and Mallet again proposed using the Dodder in 1860, when an improved water supply for the city of Dublin was under consideration. The scheme, however, failed because it could not provide enough water for the entire city. The next move came in 1877, when Rathmines Township Commissioners were exploring the ways and means of supplying their residents with water. They asked Richard Hassard to advise on the feasibility either of a supply from higher levels of the Grand Canal or from Dublin Corporation's reservoir at Stillorgan. In his report, Hassard put forward the idea of the 2 dams in Glenasmole, and his plan was adopted with very little alteration. Glenasmole would certainly have been inadequate for the needs of the whole city, so the corporation had some grounds for rejecting Mallet's plan. But the much smaller project of a supply for Rathmines and Rathgar was quite another matter, and so the waterworks we know and love were created. The construction and work on the 2 reservoirs took place from 1883 to 1887. At this point, before I continue, I'd like to thank Christopher for allowing me to use his book as a reference point for much of my story, and to quote directly from it in some instances. And not just in this episode, but in others as well. In fact, those of you who are interested, episode 4 of Wildlife Wednesday is dedicated to the book, and I'm sure I'll continue to delve into it and quote from it in the future. When I first became interested in wildlife photography, This was the first book I bought, not only for the wildlife references it contains, but because I had grown up beside the Dodder. I thought this would be a fitting starting point on my new journey. And at this point, I let Christopher himself explain how, firstly, he was born not far from where I grew up on the banks of the river, and why we always walked down the river. And then, while standing by Castle Kelly Bridge, how the reservoir came about.
Just a few hundred yards up the hill from where Michael was born, I was born, and that gave me a lifelong interest in the river. And some of my earliest memories come from being taken for a walk down the Dodder. It always had to be down the Dodder because in those days you couldn't go up the Dodder from there. There was a wall that kept any reasonable person out, so we walked down the Dodder. Well, we're here standing at Castle Kelly Bridge. We're in Glenasmole, that's the Thrush's Glen, and it's a beautiful valley that's been carved out by the Dodder. And the Dodder does odd things here, or odd things have been done to it. This is the top end of the upper lake in Glenasmole. There are two lakes. They were created in the 1870s, partly for flood control, but above all to provide water for the people of Rathmines and Rathgar.
In this next clip, Christopher talks about people telling stories about the Dodder, long before they were writing them. He talks about Finn McCool and the Fianna, and stories dating back 5,000 years before there was writing in Ireland. So the stories would have been handed down orally. But regardless of whether they were written or told orally, the fact remains that the name Finn McCool will forever be as much a part of the valley as the creatures who inhabit it.
People have been telling stories about the Dodder for a very long time, even for much, much longer than they've been writing them. And if you look at the names of the mountains above the upper Dodder Valley, there's Sea Fin and Sea Fingan and Ballymore Finn. Whose name do we have? We've got Finn McCool. And Finn McCool, the stories go back a long, long time before there was writing in Ireland. And there's a lot of good reason to believe that Finn belonged to the hunter-gatherers. And the hunter-gatherers were living and hunting in Ireland more than 5,000 years ago. So there's reason to believe that those stories could be 5,000 years old. Anyway, mountain names are there, and there's a lot of associations with Finn and the Fianna.
Glenasmole, the Valley of the Thrushes, is home not only to the aforementioned thrushes of the name, such as the blackbird, song thrush and missel thrush, but to many other species of birds and mammals. On a personal note, it's my favourite place to visit each year to photograph swallows. And when cuckoos arrive in Ireland each year, you will definitely hear one calling in this beautiful valley, even if you fail to see it. As with most places along the Dodder, kingfishers, dippers, wagtails, both grey and pied, and of course grey herons, are common, and birds of prey such as buzzards, sparrowhawk and kestrel also breathe here. When it comes to mammals, there are of course foxes and badgers, along with sika deer and occasional red deer, although they're much harder to find. The valley is also home to a healthy population of red squirrels, and although I've never come across pine martens in Glenasmole, there are regular reports from reliable sources, so I have to believe that they are here. Otters, stoats, and Ireland's only reptile, the viviparous lizard, can also be found. There are of course many other bird species, such as most of the members of the crow family, and songbirds galore. So as you can see, Glenasmole is, without doubt, a very special place. And despite the fact that it's rural through and through, It's no more than a stone's throw from Tallaght. So before I leave you today, I'd like to give you a small glimpse of this beautiful valley right on Tallagh's doorstep. Well, thanks for watching Wildlife Wednesday, folks. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If you did, give it a like and subscribe to my channel. And when you do, don't forget to ring the bell so you're notified every time I upload new content. Till next week, stay safe, stay healthy, wash your hands and maintain social distancing. We're not out of the woods yet. Take care, folks. Bye.